Right, it looks like we've got Richard Hoskins from Te Whatu Oro here. Submission number 4711 and page 51 of your agenda.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Hoskins. Thank you for your submission. As always, they are always very comprehensive. We have read them all. We haven't committed it to memory, but we have read them all. And you've got 10 minutes to give us your highlights and also answer any questions that may arise from it. So when you're ready, thank you very much.
Kia ora tātou, and first of all, apologies for the background to my Zoom. I'm doing a lot of preparatory work on measles at the moment, and this is a little poem that I penned about 10 or 11 years ago now during one of the last big outbreaks, and I didn't have time to change it for this presentation. So sorry about that, and just ignore it. It does, I hope, indicate that I have a little bit of a sense of humour.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to present, and apologies for being the kind of cameo that brought you all back from lunch or is keeping you from lunch. I did manage to log on to the live stream and watch my colleagues at Alcohol Health Watch's presentation, but before that I was tied up in the measles preparatory work, so I don't have a great sense of what else you've heard today. So if there's any repetition or anything that's irrelevant and already decided on, my apologies. I'm not going to talk very long because I think our submission speaks for itself, but I would like to touch on just 5 short points for your consideration. The first is a general issue. As you know, the Act seeks to balance supply and access to alcohol with harm minimisation. We've never really encountered any problems with people having access to alcohol, and indeed, as a health professional, that's not my major concern. So our submissions, as you would expect, concentrate on harm minimisation. And secondly, I wanted to say thank you and congratulations on already having an LAP and being at the stage where you're ready to revise it. This is one of the first revisions in the country, as you know, and often LAPs are opposed for a number of reasons, and we haven't been able to get them, to help councils get them across the line in many parts of Aotearoa. I wanted to touch briefly on the buy now, pay later provisions which are in the draft. We think this is a great initiative from Waikato District and fully support you, though we do recognise that there will need to be some attention paid to how it's worded and defined so as not to have unintended consequences raised by some of the other submitters. Next, I wanted to touch on some of the issues around remote sales. I wanted to point out that in a number of our reports on licensing work, we have requested the sorts of provisions that you're planning to put in as discretionary conditions. And we've been successful with that request on a number of occasions. Very briefly, we see no significant logistical problems that people really good at logistics, such as major supermarkets, aren't able to overcome in terms of not leaving when there is somebody, when there is nobody present to leave the alcohol included in order with. And we have already had conditions on licenses where the courier is required to make sure they're not supplying to somebody who's underage or already showing signs of intoxication. I think all of those things are in what you plan to put in as a discretionary condition, and I would just point out that it is possible to have those things as has been achieved in a number of license conditions that have been issued so far. I wanted to touch on the Raglan 1 AM closing issue. We do the licence reporting work for that region, and I note a number of your submissions have been in support of a later closing. Along with Alcohol Health Watch, we would oppose that, and we would note that there are already a number of people who live close to the club, nightclub and other alcohol outlets area in the centre of Raglan, where the concerns about noise on the street from before 1 a.m. onwards is already significant, and a later closing with further time to consume alcohol would, we believe, only exacerbate rather than ameliorate that problem. So we're fully in support of you having a 1 a.m. closing for on licenses in Raglan Town. And my final point is really just one to note. I think Alcohol Health Watch pointed this out, that probably you should set the opening times at 8 a.m. early, as at the earliest, for both on and off licenses. Other than that, we fully support option 2 and are really pleased to see it in play, and think that your LAP has already contributed to at least alcohol harm not continuing to get worse under the current legislation and regulatory framework. That's the end of what I'd planned to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Dr. Hoskins? I actually, while people are thinking of it, I actually have one which is by way more of a commentary, and that is, I note in your point 7 of key information, the percentage breakdown of alcohol-related emergency department presentations and the higher decile, or lower, I never know whether it's higher or lower, but lower deprivation decile, higher deprivation, and I found that quite interesting, because it fits exactly with where we are trying to minimise harm. So I thank you for that. I hadn't seen those figures before. Councillor Maguire.
Yes, so the Raglan people have been coming in this morning and saying if the hours went to 2 or 3, people would drift off and there wouldn't be the fights and the problems they have to deal with. But you don't agree with that, obviously.
Correct. I don't agree with that. We see the opposite, basically. The longer those sorts of venues are open for, the more problems there tend to be, and they tend to be pushed into later in the wee small hours.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else anybody wishes to ask by way of clarification? No, I think you and Dr. Seuss are both free to go.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your deliberations. We look forward to the outcome.
Thank you for taking part. We appreciate it. Thank you. And Anthea?
Yes, so we do not have Cecilia Hetter, so I suggest we let
Mr. McDowell.
Yes, is he?
Yes, he is. He's on my
yes, there
screen.
he is.
Yeah.
So next speaker we have is Steve McDowell from Tasman Liquor, number 4692.
And his presentation is on
page, sorry, I've just lost that. For the last one in your book, sorry, I have. Gosh.
55.
55, thank you.
55, okay. Welcome, Mr. McDowell. I'm just letting people get themselves to the right pages. I think you might have heard the previous speaker. You've got 10 minutes to give us your presentation from, it's Tasman Liquor, isn't it?
Yes, Madam Chair, it is. I'm a very poor substitute for Grant Simpson, who's the Managing Director of
I'm sure you'll be wonderful.
I appreciate that.
But we don't be too wonderful, or he'll be thinking you're after his job. So you've got 10 minutes, and please, if you can just allow time for anybody to have any questions, that would be really helpful. So the floor, or the car floor by the look of it, is all yours.
Yeah, look, sorry, I've only just got off a plane and sitting in a car park, so
no, and we can see you and we can hear you. We're all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Look, Madam Chair, you're right. The submission number 4692. Look, I only want to highlight 3 or 4 key things. You've got the submission in front of you, there's no point in making a great long presentation because you've got the key things. The first key point is around caps on bottle stores. Look, your community, like just about every community in New Zealand, is a growing community. With the increase in population comes increase in services. We're very mindful of ratio of bottle stores or off licenses to population. We're seeing your population increasing, so we're mindful of that. The other point we're very mindful of around the difference between bottle stores and groceries and supermarkets, the importance of a level playing field. Alcohol is alcohol. Bottle stores clearly are not the cheapest place to buy alcohol. We think if there's to be a cap on alcohol off licensing, it should apply across the board to all off licenses, not just bottle stores. Alcohol related harm comes from all manner of sources. We think it's unreasonable to segment out bottle stores in this case, and there doesn't appear to be specific defined evidence to support a differentiation. Your previous submitter, I heard reference buy now, pay later, and the use of the term unintended consequences. We very much have included that in the submission point. Look, credit cards are exempt from the proposal you've got in your paper. I think from a bottle store industry, there's a growing acceptance of buy now, pay later is not necessarily a preferred option, but this issue needs a lot more work. I think the difficulties and the issues that have been raised by the in the draft LAP need a lot more thinking about how you could avoid unintended consequences and how you could reasonably deal with the proposal to avoid communities getting into difficulty with this type of payment. So it's probably more the issue of unintended consequences that concerns Tasman. There, in terms of site definition, is referenced in the draft LAP. Tasman submits that it would be helpful to get more clarity around that. So if the council would feel it appropriate to see if it can look at a better or more fuller definition around site definition. Proximity, again, look, children aren't allowed in a bottle store under the age of 18 unless they're accompanied by an adult, if it's a supervised premise, or if it's restricted, they're not allowed in at all. Children can walk down the aisle of a supermarket containing alcohol without any restriction. That proximity distance raises issues around sensitive sites. Look, again, I think the level playing field issue falls into place here. I think that the proposed draft LAP condition is unreasonable in that it doesn't look at the total off-license sector. The last point we just wanted to highlight, and it was again raised by the previous speaker, around remote sales. Look, there's a well-accepted view and regulations around remote sales being delivered to a person over the age of 18. Expecting courier drivers and the like to manage intoxication, I think, is again raises some really interesting points. We've had past experience where people with physical disabilities, particularly with speech impediments, could be deemed to be intoxicated. It takes some expertise and training to understand the signs of intoxication. We think it's an unreasonable condition around remote sales to intoxicated persons. The law is quite clear around minors, and that seems to be working reasonably well. So look, there in summary is the key points that Tasman want to make, and appreciate all the work council is doing in its work to make the Act work as the object is stated around harm minimisation and the safe and responsible supply. Just as an aside, Tasman Group are doing a lot of work at the moment in respect to staff training. So online in-house based staff training is being put in place to significantly enhance and develop staff capability to meet their responsibilities as licence holders, and working with district licensing committees who can assess each application on its merits, not necessarily constrained by a LAP, seems to have worked reasonably well in this area over the last few years. So that's our submission, Madam Chair, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. And I'm hearing coming through the level playing field probably quite clearly. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. It's on that very point that I wish to ask a question. And so, Mr. McDowell, by its very nature, a supermarket or grocery store is not equal to a bottle store. Insofar as you ask for a level playing field, the supermarkets, grocery stores are restricted to beer, wine, and meat. Bottle stores are open to any product that contains alcohol. So they can't be compared as the same in a level playing field. So how is it that you are trying to suggest or would ask us to treat them as such?
I think it comes down to the issue that alcohol is alcohol, no matter what form it comes in. It has the potential to result in alcohol-related harm. There are issues that police have dealing with alcohol, in that it's not always apparent where the alcohol has come from. I think accessibility to alcohol, particularly where you have differentiation in hours, creates issues. I'm aware of a bottle store, for example, in Courtney Place, Wellington, which had its hours limited to 6 p.m, made a significant difference. The problem was other outlets around that area had different hours. So unless you have some consistency of application, there was always going to be problems with alcohol.
Can I take you back to the question that I asked, is that where is the level playing field? Because government in its confirmation of this act determined that beer, wine and meat could only be sold in supermarkets and grocery stores, and bottle stores could sell any product of alcohol. So therein lies the problem. Government has decreed that grocery stores are different to bottle stores. So how, just because it's alcohol is alcohol, you've got a problem that the government has said that they are different. So I can't understand the argument that you're saying it's a level playing field.
Look, I think, and thank you, Councillor. It's a good question. The position of Tasman is that alcohol-related harm in the community comes in many forms and many types. That if there is availability or restrictions on one type of off license, that people with a problem are potentially and highly likely to go to some other type of source. And that's why Tasman submits that the notion that any alcohol is capable of causing harm. Therefore, all off licenses should be treated the same in terms of availability and proximity.
So that really tends to ours, is it not?
No, I think it tends not just to ours, but also to some of the other potential issues around density and proximity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or points of clarification that people want from Mr. McDowell? Well, no, it appears you can report back on job well done, Mr. McDowell. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to present to us this afternoon. Very much appreciated, and best wishes for the rest of your day.
Thank you, councillors. Best wishes in your endeavours. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Anthea, it would appear that Cecilia Hetter has not arrived.
Correct. We've tried to phone her and the phone can't get through to her as an engaged signal. So,
and we were expecting her at 12:30.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Then I think it is 10 minutes past her time. We can't get hold of her. So my suggestion is that we I don't know what word I'm looking for. We move to the deliberations report for this hearing. So we will close the hearing of the submissions. So if Mrs. Hetter arrives, please advise her that we have waited and the time has elapsed for that opportunity. You have from her a written submission 4654, and I would suggest that you make yourself familiar with it if you haven't already. So we are remaining on live streaming, but we are now moving to, and we've moved that recommendation, we're now moving to the deliberations report, which, just give me a moment to play with all of my pieces of paper. Andrew, do you want to take us through that, please?
Certainly, I'll just bring that up. So I'll take the report as being read, but I'll just highlight a few things within the report. So on page 8, you will see that in terms of submitters' preferences, with the 3 options, option 2, which is council adopts the draft LAP, was received the most submissions at 55%, followed by option 1, retaining the current LAP at 23%, and option 3, council revoke the LAP at 14%. And 8% of submitters had no option selected. A lot of the people who preferred option 2 noted that there was widespread harm caused by alcohol and that there were too many bottle stalls already. And that reflects the early engagement submissions that we had back in June and July, that most people felt that there were too many bottle stalls, that there shouldn't be any increase on this number. There's also general support for the buy now, pay later clause for those who opted for option 2. Option 1, retaining the current policy, people seem to think that it would limit competition and fair prices, and it will limit growth in towns that may need bottle stores. Excuse me, sorry, I'm a bit sick today.
I think you're day 2 of COVID or something, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Poor
Yes.
thing. Thank you.
And there's also a comment around that education is needed to prevent alcohol harm, and that a LAP might not necessarily do that. And option 3, people felt that the policy should be revoked because standalone bottle stores, the provision is just too restricting, and that the issue around providing more competition was also raised. And the Chris Rayner submissions that we've had in with people supporting him around the Raglan having longer closing hours for on licenses was also raised for those who wanted to revoke the policy. Now, the commentary was done by theme, starting on at the bottom of page 8. So I'm not too sure whether Councillor Sedgwick, I think you were, did you want to go through it via the theme or via clause in the policy?
We want to make sure that each theme, and I think the themes are a great idea, we want to make sure that each theme is covered off in the appropriate policy. And we can either do policy flicking back or theme flicking forward. I'm inclined to just work through this that we have on page 9, noting that essentially we have 78% of submitters who are comfortable that we have a local alcohol policy. So I think that has directed us in the direction in which we're going. I think very clear. Councillor Church.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Cecilia was at work and she had to ask sign off from her boss. So she would like to talk. If I know you've gone past this, but she would like to talk by phone. She's got permission from her boss to take some time to talk to us. If it's too late, that's fine, but that's where she's at. I've sent you a message.
No, I think, thank you, Councillor Church. We have passed that moment. We've given her lead time. We have read her submission. There is a timing relevance to these. I would imagine she should have been able to have received a text, but there we go. So no, thank you. We've moved on.
Okay, thank you. I don't know.
Thank you. The way I think we should look at this is in the matters raised in submission, bottom of page 8, and one of the primary matters that everybody addressed was the buy now, pay later, which is clause 5.6. So you'll find 5.6 in the marked up version of your local alcohol policy. Anthea, do you want to go through? I'm kind of reluctant actually to make you do a lot of talking because I'm conscious of your sickness, and you'd reminded me. Sorry.
I'm actually my coughing isn't too bad today, so I think I can get through it without having a coughing attack.
Okay. 5 points.
There's mention of legal advice, Madam Chair, in the report, and if there's legal advice, because I initiated this clause, and I'm admit that there's some unintended consequences or potential, and if there's legal advice to help us with that, I'd be interested in hearing it.
Ms. Burke, do you have any thoughts on that?
And if we do, we need to go into public.
I'm aware of that, Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Might be difficult to hear me. I believe Anthea has had some advice, and I believe you were checking in terms of how that was represented in the report. Anthea, do you have any details on that?
So if that is legal advice that we're relying on, then we may need to go into public excluded.
She's
nodding her head, Madam Chair.
Yes. Okay then. So for the purposes of receiving information that's legally privileged on this, can I please have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Smith and Thompson, to go into public excluded for the purposes only of discussing the legal advice. Then we will come back out into the public meeting.